All right, I think we can start. Can everybody hear us? Perfect. So first of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming. This is a great honor for us as a country to host you in the House of Kosova. As you all are aware, this is the first time that this house happens in Davos, and we're very proud of it, and we've showcased a lot of parts of our country, including art from our National Gallery, which has been complimented, and it's really a privilege to share so much of our country that is very meaningful for us with all of you who've come from all around the world. And so it's really a pleasure. And one of the parts also that we're proud of our country is the dynamic discussion that we have, as one does in democracy. I'll start by introducing myself for those in the audience and those who are, the many of you that are watching it through live streaming. So my name is Zoya. I'm an advisor to the Prime Minister, and it's a great honor that we have two guests who will be in discussion today about all things geopolitics and how that relates to the economic growth and democracy, and especially during the current climate, which is one of very fast change and positive, but also a lot of threats too. So we're joined by Prime Minister Albin Kurti, Prime Minister of Kosova. So a round of applause, please. And we also have the honor to be joined by Professor and Dr. Ricardo Hausmann, who is a founding director of the Harvard Growth Lab and is a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. So a round of applause. So my first question is for Prime Minister Kurti. You're speaking not only here at Davos, but this is a pivotal time for our country because you have completed the first full mandate that a government has had in Kosovo ever. And so looking back, or looking back in these 4 years, what do you think are the tools that have helped the democracy of the country the most? And how does political stability, which was brought by this full term, assisted that? It might be on.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here and to host all of you at the House of Kosova. It's the first time that in Davos we are having such a representation. It will take another 2 months before I mark 4 years in office. However, beforehand, we're going to have elections in Kosovo on 9th of February. So I took off from the campaign for 2 days to come to Davos before I go back in rallying all over Kosovo. These have been good years. In spite of the challenges that we have been combating early on. First of all, there was this pandemic, COVID-19, a crisis which happens once in a century. Then we had 2 other crises, inflation crisis, and we had the crisis of energy crisis due to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. Both of these crises are typical to happening once in a half a century. So there was this triple crisis that we were facing, and we managed to come out victorious. First of all, within the first year, actually within a few months, we managed to vaccinate over 60% of our population in spite of not having vaccines, neither contract on vaccines when we took office in late March 2021. Also with our economic recovery package, by rewarding people who save energy, and by distributing economic growth that we have achieved, we softened the poverty, and we kept high levels of aggregate demand in our country. So now in 2025, annual state budget of Kosovo is 50% greater than in 2021. And this comes out of impressive economic growth, which was on average 6% of GDP, never falling below 4% of GDP. Economy of Kosovo last year, for the first time, surpassed 10 billion euros. Exports surpassed 1 billion euro, and tax revenues surpassed 3 billion euro. It's interesting to mention that tax revenues in 2024 were 40% higher than in 2021. And this shows that public trust in state institutions transfers into paying more taxes and contributing more for the state. On the other hand, I believe that people were spending rather than saving because of hopefulness and optimism. They were considering that the future is better than the present is certainly better than the past. So they can spend not only because they have the means to consume goods, but also because they were hoping that new means will arrive so they can spend also in the future. So basically, you spend at present when you think that you can spend in the future. And in this sense, this enlarged our economy and decreased unemployment. Unemployment was around 26% and now is around 11%. In spring 2021, there were 350,000 employed people altogether in Kosovo, and now there are more than 430,000. And it's for the first time in our country that we have 2,000 employees from far Asia, Philippines and Bangladesh mainly. And in addition, we doubled the employment among youth. We also targeted employment of women, which increased by 14,000. And we have managed to, at the same time, make better public services for the citizens. On one hand, by allocating more budget for healthcare and education, 50% more for healthcare and 30% more for education. But at the same time, 50% more for Ministry of Agriculture, where we tremendously increased subsidizing and grants for farmers in our country. In addition, we more than doubled FDI, and at the same time, we more than doubled minimum wage. So in this dilemma, regulation or investment, we said, we're going to do both. We did more regulation by combating crime and corruption, but at the same time, we have increased investment. So Kosovo might not be a big country, 1.6 million inhabitants, but it's a great example that economic growth and development goes hand in hand with democracy and rule of law. Besides this war in Ukraine, physical, material, horrible war, there is also this war of ideas. And there are some superpowers and some powers who want to show that development doesn't need democracy. And we want to contribute on the camp which says that economic growth should be combined with democratic progress, because human rights, dignity of the citizens, and rule of law are something that we cannot negotiate about. They cannot represent a bargaining chip as we move in the future. So I would conclude by saying that anti-corruption brought growth and freedom brought development. Freedom of both citizens and businesses alike.
Professor Hausmann, I'll turn it to you. You have this very popular class at the Kennedy School, which is named "Why Are So Many Countries Poor, Volatile, and Unequal?" So I'll flip the question that you've asked with the class naming on its head. What makes countries actually grow rapidly today, and how is governance tied to all of it?
Well, very good. Well, first of all, thank you for this invitation. I feel really, really honored and happy. You know, I come from Venezuela, and Venezuela is a country that believes in this alternative ideology that has destroyed its democracy and in the process has destroyed its economy. So Venezuelans feel that they have a history in which we were more prosperous. And we have a saying that it's very meaningful to us, but maybe you'll appreciate it. We say, remember when we were happy and did not know it? Right? We remember those days of democracy and prosperity, but we didn't, in those days, we did not know we were happy. Now we think that those were the happy days, right? And I say this because when you're happy, you should be aware of your happiness. When you have blessings, you should be aware of your blessings. And the fact that you can have a democracy in an economy that is prospering and booming, I think, and that people have this sense that you mentioned of a future that's going to be even better, that's the closest thing we get to happiness. So I hope you are aware of your happiness. I know many of your citizens, you know, might complain and so on, just like we Venezuelans were complaining of when, in fact, we should have been happy. So I'm very, very happy to be commenting on this. I would tell you that the secret of economic progress is based on an empowered population that feels that they have rights, because rights are fundamental to dream, to imagine, and without being able to dream and imagine, you don't have economic dynamism. So these things are fundamental. I would tell you that the reason why Venezuela went to hell is that they took away our rights, and without rights, you have a disempowered population that cannot plan, cannot invest, cannot bet on its own future. It has to protect itself from a government that is rapacious and so on. So that's one element that is necessary but not a sufficient condition, right? I think that the secret of prosperity is having a society that knows how to do more things. Poor society knows how to do few things, and as it grows, it learns how to do more things and more complicated things. So the society, as it grows, it diversifies and it gets into more complex, more knowledge-intensive activities, and that's sort of like what drives growth. And so when I look at a country, I ask myself, what do they do in order to know what do they know how to do? Because in order to do something, you have to know how to do it. And if you're going to expand what you do, you know, where is the knowledge going to come from? So that's always a very important question. Where does the knowledge, how does knowledge grow? If, you know, if suppose your country doesn't make watches, like Switzerland makes watches, well, how would you start making watches? Well, to make watches, you need watchmakers. But how do you become a watchmaker in a country that doesn't make watches? And if nobody becomes a watchmaker, how can you make watches, right? So you have this chicken and egg problem. And one interesting solution to the chicken and egg problem is that, well, you bring a watchmaker from somewhere else, right? And then they start making watches, and then other Kosovars learn how to make watches. And So in a study I did on Albania, we asked ourselves the question, where do new businesses come from? And so we interviewed like 32 companies and so on. And what we found is that all of those businesses were started by Albanians who had spent time abroad. And by spending time abroad, you get exposed to other businesses, you get exposed to other business ideas, to other possibilities. You're abroad, you know your country, you know other countries, so you can arbitrage the difference. So it's a huge blessing for a country to have a diaspora. The diaspora has the potential to become an amazing source of dynamism, of business ideas, of capital, of opportunity. So I saw in the numbers that FDI was very high in Kosova, but that a lot of that FDI was coming from Switzerland. And you can guess why Switzerland. Well, some people say that I was told that Kosova is the 27th canton of Switzerland and half the football team. So I think that's a very important source of dynamism. That I found that in Albania. Albania has an even more complicated history than Kosovo because Albania had Enver Hoxha that disconnected the country from the whole world for 50 years. So there's no entrepreneurship. Everything was state-owned, etc. So it was very important to mobilize that talent that was being accumulated in the diaspora to mobilize possibilities of growth in the country. So I think, going back to your question, know-how is a super important driver of growth. It's hard to get it, but being embedded in this very prosperous region, being part of Europe, and having deep connections, human connections with the outside world is an amazing source of dynamism, and the diaspora in your case is not only a source of remittances, it's a fundamental source of knowledge, investment, opportunity. And so in most of the countries I go to, they cannot brag about your rates of growth. So, and even in Europe, I'm working in Spain, in Andalusia, they think they're doing well because now they're growing at 1.5, and they're the poorest region in Spain, but they're not catching up the way you're catching up. So count your blessings and thank God. Start by being aware of your achievements. It's always useful before you complain to be aware of the good things, and I think you have a lot to thank God for. Thank you.
Speaking of Switzerland, I mean, we are in Davos, but right after here, you're going to sign the EFTA agreement between our country and the EFTA countries. And obviously, as mentioned, we have a huge diaspora in Switzerland. So these countries where we have a diaspora, the link is not only to the diaspora itself, it's also we have very good historical and current relationships with the countries themselves, like Switzerland. So it's an ongoing friendship fostered through many different facets. So Prime Minister, how do you see these countries and these alliances as part of Kosovo's geopolitical positioning and also economic positioning for growth?
Yes, we are going to sign EFTA agreement with executive representatives of Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. And this is a great achievement out of smart and tough negotiations of our Minister Zita Haidari, Minister of Industry, Entrepreneurship and Trade. And we managed to include in the agreement also export of services, not only of goods. And that is where the tough part of negotiations actually took place. She was much more optimistic than myself, and definitely she was right. She didn't want to get an agreement limited to the export of goods, so everything took longer, but for better. We have around 300,000 Albanian-speaking residents of Switzerland, and over 2/3 of them are from Kosovo. Even here in Davos, you can hear Albanian. Different shops or guards or policemen, they are very well integrated. They are too integrated to get a canton, so it's not possible. What is fascinating is that, yes, they contribute to our FDI by buying real estate, which helps our construction business. But unfortunately, the structure of our FDI is not the best that we would like to have. Around 50% is buying real estate. But again, I know why this is so. Census in Kosovo showed, Professor, that 95% of our citizens, they live in their property. So people of Kosovo don't like to become tenants or to rent out. So they like to live in their houses, in their apartments. And this is a cultural phenomena and a long tradition. We are a people and a country of small owners, which is very good for family businesses. However, some of the FDI coming from Switzerland is into manufacture. There is a company in central part of Kosovo from a Kosovar diaspora businessman who is importing raw material wood from Austria and exporting here to Switzerland kitchens. So Austria and Switzerland are neighboring countries, but it is worth of opening a franchise of a business from Switzerland to Kosovo in order to import wood from Austria and bring ready-made kitchens to Switzerland. And this is possible because electricity is cheap in Kosovo, 7.4 cents of euro per kilowatt hour, even cheaper for businesses. Then labor force is relatively cheap. There are no custom taxes for raw materials or for production machinery, and there are no taxes on corporate dividends, and no taxation for export. Everybody from young generations in Kosovo, they speak English. Many of them speak German as well, and many of them speak one of the languages of our region: Croatian, Bosniak, Serbian, or Turkish. So multilingual, talented, energetic youth is something that is our advantage. However, what we were lacking, and we learned from Switzerland, from our diaspora in Switzerland, is dual education system. How to link labor market with professional education. After the war, there has become fashionable in my country people to study international relations, diplomacy, and political science. These are good, you know, and I read a lot in these fields. But then again, you need people who are going to have jobs in, let's call it, non-academic professionalism. And that is taking place now. We have 25 professional schools in 15 different municipalities, 12 different profiles, altogether over 1,600 pupils, students, who spend 2 to 3 days in a factory and 2 to 3 days in a school. And in next mandate, we plan to add another 10 profiles. So this is something that will help us increase labor force, both in terms of quantity and quality. However, we have to have some kind of certainty that this labor force will remain at home. Because once they get these certificates and these diplomas, they might come to Germany, because Germany is like default option for people of Kosovo. Unfortunately, so many people first came to Germany and then started to think, because we have so much family here. 500,000 Albanians from Kosovo are in Germany alone. And in Switzerland, as you mentioned, we have people commute so often. Like we have Basel, Zurich, and Geneva, direct flight several times per day, every day. And this amounts to 27 flights per day in summer months of July and August. So our diaspora is not just vast, it's also homesick. Sometimes I doubt that they left so they could come back, you know. So, we have a great potential there. And our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, and especially our Deputy Foreign Minister Lisa Goshi, I don't know any other person who knows diaspora better than her. Maybe they are, but I don't know. I'm not aware of them. She has been trying to engage so our diaspora does not come back home just to buy another apartment for their youngest daughter or son, but to invest in the economy, because now it's not like in the 90s when we invited people to sacrifice in order to contribute. We invite them to invest in order to profit. And here, Sovereign Wealth Fund is something that we look forward. We have compiled a concept document, voted in our government meeting. We have a law which did pass in the second reading, but is waiting for the green light in Constitutional Court, because opposition main activity in Kosovo is addressing to Constitutional Court or our laws. So our opposition functions like Toby tax, you know, like putting sand on your wheels, so everything gets rather slow. However, I believe that in this year we're going to establish Sovereign Wealth Fund, so citizens of Kosovo and diaspora can buy shares in Trepča complex of mines and minerals, in Electroenergy Corporation of Kosovo, in Telecom of Kosovo, and so on and so forth. These are now profitable publicly owned enterprises. And this makes us very proud, because out of 17 central publicly owned enterprises in the past, only 2 were operating with profit. As we speak, more than half of them. The cumulative loss of publicly owned enterprises in the years 2018-2020 was 59 million euros. And in our last 3 years of our term, we managed to have a profit, aggregate profit of 139.6 million euros. And we are also showing that women are very good managers. And I would like to mention 2 of them, Burbuce Hona, CEO of Telecom of Kosovo, and Nora Rotsi, CEO of Post of Kosovo. So good professionals can render publicly owned enterprises profitable. And I think we also serve as an example that perhaps others can learn. Meanwhile, we should learn how to keep it solid in time. Because once you are successful, you certainly get some new attacks. So how to sustain in keeping this profitable publicly owned enterprises to financially perform even better in the future.
Professor Hausmann, we are at a time of unprecedented change. Some have likened it to 1989. the last time there was so much tumult in various aspects of the society. We are hosting later today a panel in partnership with Oxford University on AI and its effects on democracy, and also the countries that are maybe not at the very forefront of the race. How do you view growth in this landscape, and what do you think the advantages are for a country like Kosovo that maybe can be quicker on its feet to react to changes?
Oh, very good, very good question. Let me just comment or reflect a little bit on the comments by the Prime Minister. I like to measure foreign direct investment not in euros or dollars, but in terms of knowledge flows, right? Because it's what are the businesses that are happening that could not have happened had the knowledge or the business connection not be related to the diaspora or to the diaspora experience, to returnees that learned something in the diaspora and came back home to do it, or saw the business opportunity because they know Kosovo, they know another country, they can arbitrage the difference. For example, when I go to Tirana, to me it's like one of the gastronomic capital. It's a fantastic food. And you talk to these business owners, how come you got this restaurant? Oh, I was working in Italy, I was working in Belgium, I was working, etc. They learned gastronomy, etc. They passed it through Albanian eyes, Albanian taste, etc., and produced something very unique, etc. And you mentioned services. Business services, export of business services that's the fastest growing segment of international trade. I saw it in your statistics. It's already important. Business process outsourcing, more knowledge-intensive business process outsourcing. Typically, you need somebody on the other side and somebody on this side. The other side might find the contract, the client, and this side might know who to hire, how to train them to produce the service. So all of these things are very much related to a deep integration to Europe. So my prediction would be that in due course you will converge to the European average because you're in Europe and you're socially integrated to Europe. You're integrated from a knowledge point of view in Europe. Now we're facing complicated times. Was it yesterday or the day before that Trump was inaugurated? The U.S. has become, if you want, more unpredictable. It's very useful to be predictable sometimes because others know how to anticipate your behavior, but when others cannot anticipate your behavior, everybody becomes more cautious and more guarded. I think there's a clear possibility that the solution that Trump may want for Ukraine may not be to the liking of Europe, and Europe should not accept it. But that means essentially that Europe will have to develop deterrence and autonomous defense capabilities. So I cannot imagine, I think there's a very significant possibility that the direction of Europe is that it will become a military superpower. It has the economy to become a military superpower. It has the ambition or the potential technology to become a military superpower. I find it hard to integrate Ukraine to the European Union without security guarantees on Ukraine. And if the United States does not want to provide security guarantees, well, Europe will have to provide security guarantees, but it will have to have the wherewithal to do it. So I think that's part of the potential changes in the geopolitics of this place. And so I think, strengthening your European identity is going to be part of the equation. I know Albania. In Albania, all the parties are pro-Europe, so it's there's no Euroscepticism. All parties are pro-Europe, and if you ask an Albanian, tell me a definition of what's an Albanian, that may not be completely true, but it's aspirationally true. Albanians say, we Albanians are European. And it's not completely true in the sense that they're not part of Europe in some sense, but they are in the middle of Europe. They're in the European world, and it's aspirationally so because Europe is prosperous, Europe is democratic, Europe is rule of law, etc. So I think that that's what I think a little bit what might be coming down the pipe in terms of changes to the sort of like the international architecture. I don't particularly support it. I think that a role where there's a broad coalition, international coalition based on values is safer for the world. It's better for the world, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to be the scenario we'll have to deal with. And in that scenario, I think that Europe will have to develop its autonomy. What do they call it in the EU? They call it strategic autonomy or something.
That's the concept of President Macron.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a theme going forward.
The Prime Minister, you've maintained a consistent stance of that the country is pursuing its path towards EU and NATO accession. Can you discuss more why joining these alliances and moving towards Euro-Atlantic organizations is important for the country?
I believe that European Union is the most important and valuable project of peace and concept of prosperity in the world since Second World War. And we want to join EU and we want to join NATO because we want both to benefit and contribute. We most likely will first join NATO. And while facing this Russian aggression in Ukraine, which also impacted the Balkans, we want to accelerate our accession to NATO, but not only limited to acceleration towards NATO membership, but also due to the fact that we want to get stronger in ourselves. We have increased defense spending. So since 2023, we have fulfilled the so-called 2% quota of NATO member states, which has been a joint pledge in NATO Wealth Summit in 2014. We're buying Javelin anti-tank missiles from US, Black Hawk choppers from US, and we're also buying Bayraktar fighting drones TB2 from Turkey. We have doubled the number of our soldiers. We have increased the maximum age for our soldiers from 23 to 25. We have removed the ceiling of 5,000 members for our army. We have taken from Finland the model of total defense, comprehensive defense, which means that every citizen will know its role and place in case of natural disasters or armed conflict. And from Poland, we have taken this model of education for security, which means that pupils and students in their youth and adolescence in gymnasiums and high schools will learn how to behave, what to do and what to not do in case of natural disasters and armed conflicts, because we've noticed that majority of youngsters are not able to give first aid to someone else or themselves for that matter. So, for example, just to stop bleeding. How do you stop bleeding of a friend if there was a flood or earthquake or a wildfire? So I believe that with our dedication to army, police, defense, security, we are basically ready to join NATO. This year we are going to be also a hosting country, not merely a participating one, in Defender Europe 25. And we have done co-deployments with both US and British Army. So joining NATO is something that we look forward. Also to EU, because I think that we are in Europe, but European Union should become Europe, and it's still not Europe. With the inclusion of the Western Balkans, EU will become Europe where we already are. We thought that we learned at school actually, that the eastern border of Europe is the Ural mountain ring in Russian Federation, but nowadays we see that the eastern border of Europe is front line where the Ukrainian soldiers are facing Russian aggression. And we equate between victory for Ukraine and peace in Europe. Let's see how this will unfold in this year 2025. But I believe that joining EU and NATO is a principled, value-based orientation. We believe in democracy, human rights, rule of law, and at the same time it represents something that we find both beneficial currently, but also in long term, in the sense that I don't think that our generation can come up with something better than European Union. I don't know. It should be left open to next generations, not to say that parents have decided everything for their children. But for our lifetime, I think that European Union, as you said, Professor, has a great opportunity and perhaps even duty to get ever stronger and more powerful.
Let me just interject that as a Latin American, you know, Latin America has 18 countries. We speak the same language. We have the same dominant religion. We've been talking about having a union of whatever, and we have advanced nothing. Europe has 27 countries that should be expanded, that speak, I don't know, 35 languages, and that have fought wars between them. We haven't. But with that cultural diversity, with that religious diversity, with that history of conflict, what the European Union has achieved, I think, is the most ambitious political project that humanity has ever attempted. So I fully agree with you that we should, you know, the Europeans are very critical of Europe, but I think that we should remind them how great their achievement to date has been and how much better it can become.
It seems, Professor, that in Europe there is still alive this memory of two world wars. And now those who forgot it, they got reminded with Russian aggression into Ukraine. And I noticed, for example, in Kosovo, the first reaction was reactment of trauma, what we in Kosovo has been going through. Because in 1998, 1999, we had genocide of Serbian army and police led by a regime of Milosevic. And back then, over 10,000 civilians were killed. Then around 20,000 women have been raped. 120,000 houses have been destroyed or burned down. And vast majority of people were expelled from their homes, and many of them from the country altogether. So when we saw Bucha massacre in Ukraine, there was this tense feeling among people of Kosovo that war can happen again. On the other hand, people to live and to move on in life, they have to forget a bit. It's sad, but there is no other way. If you keep reminding yourself of your sufferings, it's difficult to move forward into the future. So the Russian aggression in Ukraine, in a way, brought back what maybe people also were trying to forget, so they can live peacefully in the future. And I think that this is a factor of unifying people in Europe, this Russian aggression. And in addition to that, in addition to a common enemy, so to say, maybe in Latin America you are too similar to unite. You know, maybe you need a slightly a bit larger difference, so you can say we are so different, so we get together. I don't know, you know that much better than me. Just a hypothesis.
I am being pressured to end the discussion because, as we mentioned, Prime Minister is going to sign or be at the signing of the very important agreement, and we all know the infamous Davos traffic. So we would like to be respectful to the Swiss hosts and be very much on time. So thank you both. A round of applause. Thank you very much.
Exchange our contacts and continue this conversation.